The Realtor's Mercedes was halfway down my gravel driveway when the gate slammed shut behind it with a metallic clang that echoed through the pine trees. I watched from my security monitor as the woman in designer heels and the man with his tablet. Computer stared at my newly installed sign that read, "Private property. Trespassers will be prosecuted. This includes you, Margaret." The trail camera I'd mounted on the fence post flashed repeatedly, capturing their confused expressions in high definition. I took a slow sip from my coffee mug and leaned back in my chair, watching the show unfold on my laptop screen. After 3 months of dealing with Margaret Peaton's escalating harassment, I was finally ready to play her game, but by my rules. My name is Daniel Foster, and I'm 42 years old. I work as a systems analyst for a tech company that lets me work remotely, which is why I bought my cabin retreat in Pine Ridge Estates 5 years ago. The property sits on 3 acres of wooded land at the end of a private road, surrounded by towering evergreens and blessed with a kind of silence you can't find in the city. Or at least it used to be silent before Margaret Peaton decided to make my life her personal project. Margaret was the HOA president of Pine Ridge Estates, a position she wielded like a medieval lord ruling over peasants. At 58 years old, with her perfectly styled silver hair and designer tracksuits, she patrolled our community of 30 homes like a hawk searching for prey. She carried a leather-bound notebook everywhere, documenting every perceived violation with the enthusiasm of a detective solving a murder case. Our conflict started innocently enough. I'd installed solar panels on my cabin's roof without submitting the proper forms to the Architectural Review Committee. It was an honest mistake since I'd gotten all the county permits and assumed that was sufficient. Margaret showed up at my door on a Tuesday morning, clipboard in hand, informing me with a satisfied smile that I was in violation of Covenant 17. 3 subsection B. I apologized and submitted the paperwork retroactively, paid the $200 fine, and thought that would be the end of it. But Margaret had tasted blood in the water, and she wanted more. The following week, she cited me for having the wrong type of gravel in my driveway. Apparently, Pine Ridge Estates only permitted Grade 2 river rock, and mine was Grade 3. The week after that, my bird feeder was positioned 4 and 2 close to the property line. Then, my garbage cans were visible from the road for 15 minutes longer than the approved window. Each violation came with fines ranging from $50 to $500. I paid them all, documenting everything. While Margaret's visits became more frequent and her attitude more hostile, she started referring to my cabin as an eyesore during HOA meetings, claiming it brought down property values despite being one of the newer constructions in the neighborhood. The situation exploded when Margaret discovered I was running my consulting business from home. She insisted this violated the residential zoning rules, even though I showed her the county's home business permit I'd obtained. She called code enforcement, the fire department, and even animal control when she spotted a family of raccoons near my deck, claiming I was feeding wild animals. Each agency found no violations, which only made Margaret angrier. She began sending emails to other residents, warning them about the dangerous precedent I was setting. She posted photos of my property on the community Facebook page with captions like, "Is this the future of Pine Ridge Estates? And some people just don't belong in nice neighborhoods." I tried reasoning with her. I attended an HOA meeting and publicly apologized for any inconvenience, offering to work with the board to ensure compliance. Margaret responded by creating a special committee to investigate quote-unquote problem properties, with mine being the only property under investigation. That's when she crossed the line from annoying to illegal. 3 weeks ago, I received a call from my neighbor, Tom Brennan, asking if I was selling my cabin. When I said no, he forwarded me an email from a luxury real estate newsletter that listed my property as coming soon to market, priced to sell quickly due to HOA compliance issues. The listing included photos of my cabin taken from angles that required someone to be on my property to capture them. I did some digging and discovered Margaret had been telling potential buyers that my property was in pre-foreclosure due to unpaid HOA fines, which was completely fabricated since I'd paid every single fine within the required time frame. She'd even created a fake listing on a private realtor network using her daughter's real estate license number without her daughter's knowledge. But Margaret's master stroke came last Sunday. I was in town getting groceries when my security system sent an alert to my phone. Multiple people were on my property. I opened the camera app to see Margaret leading a realtor and a young couple through my front yard, gesturing at my cabin like she was Vanna White revealing a prize. I could hear her through my doorbell camera's audio feed telling them the property would be available within 30 days once the HOA completed the forced sale process. She claimed I hadn't paid assessments in 2 years and the association was exercising its lien rights. The couple seemed very interested, especially when Margaret quoted them a price that was 40% below market value. I immediately called my lawyer, Jennifer Park, who told me to document everything, but not to confront them directly. Instead, she suggested I let Margaret dig her hole a little deeper, so I did. I watched as Margaret used a key to open my storage shed, which she must have copied from the emergency set the HOA required all homeowners to provide. She showed them around my workshop, apologizing for the mess and assuring them it would all be cleared out soon. The realtor, a woman named Patricia something, was taking photos and measurements while Margaret continued her fictional narrative about my financial troubles and the association's reluctant but necessary action to maintain property standards. The young couple, who Margaret kept calling the Washingtons, were eating it up, already discussing where they'd put their hot tub. After they left, I spent the next week preparing my response. First, I had a new electronic gate installed at the entrance to my driveway, complete with keypad entry and security cameras. Then I posted large signs stating the property was not for sale, that trespassing would be prosecuted, and specifically naming Margaret Peaton as a person banned from the premises. I also created my own listing on every real estate website I could find, stating clearly that the property was not for sale and warning realtors about fraudulent listings. I included screenshots of Margaret's fake advertisements and filed complaints with the State Real Estate Commission. Jennifer sent Margaret a cease and desist letter via certified mail, but Margaret apparently thought she was untouchable. She responded by scheduling an open house for the following Sunday, sending invitations to 12 potential buyers. That's what led to this morning's beautiful scene. The first realtor arrived at 9 a.m. sharp, only to find the electronic gate locked and the signs prominently displayed. When he called the number Margaret had given him, which was actually her personal cell, she insisted there must be some mistake and told him to wait while she sorted it out. By 9:30, 4 more cars had arrived, creating a traffic jam on our narrow mountain road. Margaret showed up in her white Range Rover, dressed in her finest real estate showing outfit, complete with a pearl necklace and designer handbag. She marched up to the gate and began entering random numbers on the keypad, her face growing redder with each failed attempt. I stepped out onto my front porch, coffee in hand, and waved at the growing crowd. Margaret spotted me and started screaming that I needed to open the gate immediately or she'd call the police. I simply pointed to the no trespassing signs and went back inside. She did call the police. 2 officers arrived 45 minutes later to find 7 cars blocking the road and Margaret in full meltdown mode. She insisted she had the legal right to show the property due to unpaid HOA fines. When Officer Davidson asked to see the documentation, she produced a stack of papers that turned out to be nothing more than the violation notices she'd written, none of which showed any unpaid balances. I came out to speak with the officers, bringing my own stack of documents, including receipts for all paid fines, the cease and desist letter, screenshots of the fraudulent listings, and security footage of Margaret trespassing on my property. Officer Davidson's expression grew increasingly stern as he reviewed everything. Margaret tried to claim she had implied permission as HOA president to access all properties for inspection purposes. That's when Jennifer arrived, having driven up from her office when I texted her about the situation. She explained to the officers that HOA presidents have no such authority and that Margaret had committed multiple crimes, including trespassing, fraud, and attempted theft by deception. The realtors and potential buyers, realizing they'd been duped, began leaving one by one, but not before several mentioned they'd be filing complaints with their brokerages about the false listing. Patricia, the realtor from the previous week, looked particularly angry when she realized Margaret had used her to unknowingly participate in fraud. Officer Davidson took Margaret aside and explained she was being issued a criminal trespass warning. If she stepped foot on my property again, she would be arrested. He also informed her that the district attorney would be reviewing the case for potential fraud charges. But the best part came the next day. Jennifer had contacted the other HOA board members with evidence of Margaret's actions. An emergency board meeting was called for that evening. I attended along with 15 other residents who had heard about the situation. Margaret sat at the head of the table, still trying to maintain her authority, insisting she had acted in the association's best interests. The board treasurer, Robert Hang, presented his findings. Not only had Margaret acted without board approval, but she'd also used HOA funds to pay for the fraudulent listings and advertisements. She'd spent over $3,000 of association money on her vendetta against me. The vote to remove her as president was unanimous, with even her usual allies voting against her. But that wasn't the end. The board also voted to pursue criminal charges for embezzlement and to file a civil suit to recover the misused funds plus damages. Margaret stood up, her face purple with rage, and declared that we were all making a huge mistake. She said, "Pine. Ridge Estates would fall apart without her leadership and that property values would plummet." Then she pointed at me and shrieked that this was all my fault for not knowing my place. As she stormed out, her heel caught on the door frame and she stumbled, her leather notebook flying across the room and spilling its contents everywhere. Pages and pages of notes about various residents scattered on the floor, revealing she'd been documenting perceived violations for every single home in the neighborhood, planning her next targets. 2 weeks later, Margaret was formally charged with criminal trespass, fraud, and embezzlement. The district attorney's office took the case seriously, especially after 3 other homeowners came forward with similar stories of harassment and false claims about their properties. At her arraignment yesterday morning, Margaret pleaded not guilty to all charges. The judge set bail at $50,000 and ordered her to have no contact with me or any other Ridge Estates residents. The prosecutor told me afterward that if convicted, on all counts, she could face up to 5 years in prison and fines up to $100,000. I saw Margaret leaving the courthouse with her lawyer, and for the first time since I'd met her, she looked small and defeated. When she spotted me, her face contorted with fury, but her lawyer grabbed her arm and whispered urgently in her ear. She turned away, got into her Range Rover, and drove off. As I watched her leave, her HOA president parking placard fell off her windshield and landed in a puddle.